September 20th, 1944. 14:32 hours. South bank of the Waal River, Nijmegen, Netherlands. Cold wind pushes across the wide gray water. Mud clings to the boots of American paratroopers crouched behind a low earthen embankment. The river in front of them stretches nearly 400 yards wide. Slow-moving, silent, too silent. Across the water, the northern skyline of Nijmegen rises through drifting smoke. Brick buildings, church towers, and the long steel arches of the bridge the Germans still hold. Suddenly the silence cracks. A burst of MG-42 machine gun fire rips across the river. The sound is sharp, mechanical, terrifyingly fast. Tracer rounds slash through the air, stitching the water with violent splashes. Men instinctively press lower into the mud. Someone swears under his breath. Private First Class Daniel Russo wipes sweat from his eyes and looks down at the boat beside him. It barely looks like military equipment. Canvas stretched over a wooden frame. Light, thin, fragile. A folding assault boat. The kind engineers use to ferry troops across rivers when bridges are gone. But this time the bridge is still there. And that's the problem. Because the Germans control it. Captain Julian Cook of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment moves down the line. His boots splash through. Puddles as he passes clusters of paratroopers, waiting beside the boats. Men from the 82nd Airborne Division. Veterans of Sicily. Veterans of Italy. Veterans who jumped into Normandy only 3 months earlier. Yet even they stare at the river with a quiet kind of dread. Cook stops near one of the boats and looks across the water. Through binoculars he can see movement along the northern bank. German paratroopers. Fallschirmjäger. Elite soldiers dug into defensive positions overlooking the river. Machine gun nests hidden behind sandbags. Mortars waiting behind the dikes. And artillery farther back in the city. The Germans know exactly what the Americans must do. Cook lowers the binoculars slowly. Behind him, hundreds of paratroopers crouch in shallow trenches carved into the riverbank. They wait beside 50 flimsy boats. The plan sounds simple. Cross the river, assault the northern bank, capture the far end of the bridge, link up with British armored forces advancing from the south. But standing here now, staring at the Waal's cold water, the plan feels different, impossible, because the crossing must happen in daylight. No darkness to hide them, no smoke thick enough to blind the German gunners. Just open water, and machine guns already ranging the river. A jeep bounces down the muddy road behind the lines. It stops near Cook. Major General James Gavin steps out. Commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, only 37 years old. Young, sharp-eyed, calm under pressure. But even Gavin pauses when he sees the river. The distance. The exposed banks. The enemy positions. He walks to the edge of the embankment and studies the northern shore. Through drifting smoke he can see flashes of movement. German soldiers shifting in trenches. Barrels of machine guns pointed straight at the water. They know. They're waiting. Gavin turns back toward Cook. How many boats ready? 50, sir. Enough men. Cook nods. 2 battalions. Gavin looks again at the river. The Waal is wide, deceptively calm, but the current moves fast enough to push small boats downstream. Under fire, even a small drift could scatter the assault. The boats must cross straight, fast, perfectly coordinated, or the men inside them will become floating targets. Behind the lines, artillery suddenly thunders to life. American guns fire from concealed positions south of the city. Heavy shells scream overhead. They explode along the northern bank in violent bursts of dirt and smoke. The ground shakes. Men glance upward as the artillery barrage rolls across the German positions. For a moment the machine gun fire stops, but nobody believes the bombardment will silence the defenses. The Germans are dug in too well. Cook raises his voice. All right, men, listen up. The paratroopers shift closer. Faces tense, helmets muddy, eyes locked on their officers. Cook points toward the water. You already know the mission. A pause. We cross that river. He lets the words hang there. Fast as we can. Another pause. And we take the north end of that bridge. Some men nod. Others remain silent, because everyone understands what he is not saying. Half these boats may never reach the far bank. Cook continues. Once you hit the shore, move fast. No bunching up. Get off the beach and push inland. Take out those machine guns. He gestures toward the distant buildings. And whatever happens, his voice hardens. We do not stop. A young paratrooper raises his hand. Sir, what if the boats start sinking? Cook meets his eyes. Then you swim. A few nervous laughs ripple through the group. But nobody finds it funny. because every man knows the truth. Many of them will end up in that water, and the Waal River will turn red before this day ends. Across the river, a German machine gun opens fire again. The MG-42 roars like ripping canvas. Bullets slap into the water near the shoreline. Tracers streak low over the river's surface. German gunners are testing their range, measuring distance, preparing. Cook watches the impacts in the water. Then he looks at the boats. Canvas, wood, no armor, no cover. Just men sitting shoulder to shoulder with paddles, crossing straight into the teeth of prepared defenses. A suicide mission. Major General Gavin studies the river one last time. Then he turns to Cook. Captain. Cook stands straighter. Yes, sir. Gavin's voice is calm, but there is no hesitation. You're going to have to take that bridge. Cook nods slowly. Behind them, the artillery barrage fades. Smoke drifts across the northern bank, and in the brief silence that follows, the German machine guns open fire again. Long, violent, unstoppable. The river erupts with splashes. Gavin watches the bullets tearing into the water. Then he gives the order that will send hundreds of men into the most dangerous river crossing of the war. But the worst part isn't the crossing. It's what the paratroopers will discover waiting for them on the far shore. September 20th, 1944, 15:01 hours. South bank of the Waal River, Nijmegen. The order moves down the muddy embankment like an electric current. Launch the boats. Men rise from the dirt. Boots slip in wet clay as paratroopers drag the fragile assault boats toward the water. Canvas hulls scrape across stones and broken reeds. Wooden frames creak under sudden weight. Private First Class Daniel. Russo grabs the front handle of Boat 12 with 3 other men. The canvas feels thin beneath his fingers, too thin. Move, move! Officers shout above the growing thunder of artillery. Behind the American lines, batteries of 105mm howitzers fire again. Shells roar overhead and slam into the northern bank, throwing columns of mud into the air. For a moment, the far shore disappears behind smoke. But nobody believes it will last. Russo and the others reach the edge of the water. The Waal laps quietly against the mud, dark and cold. The current slides past with slow determination. Push! They shove the boat forward. Canvas touches water. It floats. Barely. 8 paratroopers climb in, knees pressing against wooden ribs. Each man grips a paddle. Rifles lie across their laps. The boat rocks dangerously, then stabilizes. Go, go! Dozens of boats slide into the river at the same moment. From above, it would look like a strange armada. 50 fragile craft drifting into the wide gray water, packed with soldiers wearing steel helmets and parachute insignia. The first boats push away from the bank. Paddles dip into the current. Water splashes softly. For 2 seconds, the river remains eerily quiet. Then the northern shore explodes. MG-42 machine guns erupt in a single terrifying chorus. The sound is unmistakable, a ripping metallic roar that seems too fast to be human. German gunners have waited patiently for this moment. Now they fire everything they have. Tracers streak low across the water, red lines flashing through drifting smoke. The first bullets hit the river around the boats. Water erupts in violent splashes. Men instinctively duck lower. Keep paddling! Someone shouts. Russo digs his paddle deep into the river. The current resists immediately, tugging the boat sideways. Other men paddle frantically, trying to keep the bow pointed toward the far bank. The boat inches forward, but it feels impossibly slow. Another burst of machine gun fire rips across the river. 2 bullets punch through the canvas hull of a nearby boat. Water sprays through the holes as men shout in panic. A paratrooper slaps his helmet against the wound in the hull, trying to slow the leak. More boats push off behind them. Soon the entire river is filled with small assault craft. 50 boats, nearly 300 men, and every one of them is exposed. Mortars begin falling next. German tubes hidden behind the dikes fire in rhythmic bursts. Shells arc high before plunging into the river. One explodes directly beside Boat 7. The blast flips the entire craft. Men vanish into the water. Russo sees helmets bobbing between waves as soldiers struggle. Under heavy equipment, some try to swim, others simply disappear beneath the current. Don't look, someone shouts. Just paddle! Russo forces himself to keep moving. Across the river, the German machine guns sweep back and forth methodically. They rake the waterline, adjusting aim with cold precision. A burst tears through the boat ahead. 3 men collapse instantly. The boat drifts sideways, half filled with water. Another mortar explodes farther downstream, throwing bodies and debris into the air. Still the boats push forward. Paddles churn. Water splashes. Men shout. Some pray quietly under their breath. The current drags several boats downstream despite desperate paddling. The formation begins to stretch apart. Officers scream directions across the chaos. Straight ahead. Keep together. But the river does not listen. Halfway across, the crossing becomes pure survival. Machine gun fire is constant now. Endless ripping bursts hammering the river surface. Tracers whip inches above helmets. Russo hears the sound of bullets striking wood. Thunk, thunk, thunk. One smashes through the paddle beside his hand. Another tears through the canvas near his boots. Cold water begins pooling around their feet. We're leaking! Just keep moving. The far shore slowly grows closer. Through drifting smoke, Russo can finally see the German positions clearly. Sandbag bunkers, camouflaged machine gun nests, infantry firing rifles from shallow trenches. They are barely 100 yards away now. And the fire only grows heavier. A boat to Russo's left suddenly jerks sideways. A machine gun burst cuts through the entire row of soldiers inside. The boat continues drifting with no one paddling. Men slump forward over the gunwales, dead before they hit the water. Russo feels his arms burning. Each paddle stroke feels slower than the last, but the northern bank is finally close. 80 yards, 60. German soldiers now throw grenades toward the approaching boats. Some explode short, sending geysers of water into the air. Others land dangerously close. One blast flips another boat completely. More men vanish into the river. The crossing has become a massacre, yet the surviving boats keep moving, because stopping means death. 40 yards, 30. Russo can see German faces now. Young soldiers firing rifles over sandbags. Machine gunners feeding fresh belts into their weapons. And behind them, more troops running to reinforce the shoreline. The Germans expected this assault. They prepared for it. But what they did not expect was how many Americans would still reach the shore. Russo's boat slams into the muddy bank with a violent jolt. Out! Out! Paratroopers leap into waist-deep water. Bullets snap overhead. Men stumble forward through mud and reeds. Some fall instantly. Others keep running. Russo drags himself onto the bank, lungs burning, rifle clutched tight. For a brief moment, he glances back at the river. The water behind them is filled with wrecked boats, floating helmets, and bodies drifting in the current. But there is no time to think about that now, because the real battle is about to begin, and the German defenses waiting beyond the riverbank are even stronger than anyone imagined. September 20th, 1944, 15:09 hours. Northern bank of the Waal River, Nijmegen. Mud swallows boots the moment the first paratroopers reach land. Private First Class Daniel Russo drags himself forward through knee-deep sludge, rifle clutched tight against his chest. Water pours from his uniform. His helmet hangs crooked over one eye. Behind him, the river still screams with gunfire. But ahead lies something worse. The German defense line. Move off the bank, an officer shouts. Paratroopers scatter across the muddy shoreline, scrambling for any scrap of cover. Some dive behind broken wooden pilings. Others collapse behind shallow ditches carved by rainwater. Bullets snap overhead. German rifles crack from the top of the embankment. Machine guns rake the entire river edge. Russo throws himself behind a patch of reeds as dirt bursts beside his face. The ground trembles with the impact of incoming rounds. A man 2 yards away spins backward and drops without a sound. Russo forces himself not to stare. He crawls forward instead. The terrain ahead slopes, upward toward a tall earthen dike that protects the northern farmland from flooding. German positions sit directly on top of that ridge. Perfect defensive ground. From there, they can fire down into anyone climbing the slope. Grenades! Someone shouts. A group of paratroopers gathers near Russo, pulling fragmentation grenades from their belts. A lieutenant waves them forward. Up the dike! Clear those guns! There is no hesitation. The men surge toward the slope. Russo runs with them. Mud sucks at his boots as he climbs the steep embankment. Machine gun fire cuts across the slope, stitching lines of dirt between the attackers. One paratrooper tumbles backward. Another collapses halfway up. Still, the rest keep moving. Russo reaches the top of the ridge and throws himself over the crest. German soldiers are waiting. A machine gun crew kneels behind sandbags just 15 feet away. The gunner swings the MG-42 toward the new threat, eyes wide in sudden shock. Russo fires first. His M1 Garand cracks 3 times. The gunner collapses across the weapon. The assistant gunner tries to grab the machine gun, but a grenade explodes beside the sandbags, blasting earth and steel fragments across the position. The entire nest goes silent, but the ridge stretches far in both directions. More German soldiers appear from trenches dug along the dike. Rifles flash. Grenades fly through the air. The fight becomes chaotic instantly. Paratroopers and German infantry collide at close range across the narrow ridgeline. Shots echo just feet apart. Russo ducks as a German soldier lunges from a trench with a rifle bayonet. The blade slices past his shoulder. Russo swings the butt of his Garand forward, smashing the attacker across the jaw. The man drops. Another American finishes him with a burst from a Thompson submachine gun. "Clear the trench!" someone yells. Paratroopers begin moving along the defensive line, jumping into shallow trenches and firing into the dugouts where German soldiers try to reload. The fighting is brutal and fast. There is no room for careful tactics, just survival. A flamethrower team arrives from the riverbank moments later. The operator lifts the nozzle toward a bunker hidden in the dike wall. A stream of fire erupts forward. Flames pour into the firing slit. The bunker falls silent seconds later. Smoke curls into the gray afternoon sky. But the Germans are far from defeated. Reinforcements pour in from the nearby town of Nijmegen. Infantry squads rush toward the ridge carrying rifles and Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons. Machine guns farther inland begin firing again. This time their targets are the paratroopers on the ridge. Bullets rip across the crest. Russo dives into a trench beside 3 other soldiers. Dirt showers down as rounds smash into the earth above their heads. "How many made it across?" one man asks breathlessly. No one answers, because nobody knows. Across the river, more boats are still struggling toward the shore. Some make it, many do not. Mortars continue falling among them. Yet despite the chaos, the northern bank slowly fills with American soldiers. Dozens become hundreds. The crossing, impossible as it seemed, is actually working. Russo peeks over the trench edge. Beyond the dike lies open farmland dotted with farmhouses, hedgerows, and narrow roads leading straight toward the Nijmegen bridges. That is the real objective. The bridges must be captured from the north while British armored units push from the south. If the plan works, Allied forces will finally break through into Germany. But the Germans understand that just as clearly, and they are determined to stop it here. A sudden roar echoes across the fields. Russo turns toward the sound. A German half-track bursts onto the road beyond the ridge, its mounted machine gun already firing toward the newly landed paratroopers. Behind it comes a second vehicle, then a third. German counterattack. The lieutenant beside Russo swears under his breath. "Anti-tank team!" 2 paratroopers scramble forward carrying a bazooka launcher and ammunition bag. They crawl to the ridge edge and aim toward the approaching vehicles. The first half-track closes rapidly, spraying bullets across the dike. Russo watches the bazooka gunner steady his aim. The rocket fires with a violent flash. The projectile streaks across the field. Direct hit. The half-track erupts into flames. German soldiers jump from the burning vehicle as smoke billows into the air. But the second half-track continues forward. Its machine gun sweeps across the ridge again. And behind it, more German infantry appear along the road. The battle for the northern bank has only just begun. And the Americans who survived the river crossing now face a fight that could decide the fate of the entire operation. September 20th, 1944, 15:27 hours. North bank of the Waal River, outskirts of Nijmegen. The second German half-track roars toward the dike, its engine howling across the open farmland. The mounted machine gun hammers relentlessly, bullets tearing through the grass and smashing into the crest of the embankment, where American paratroopers cling to their fragile foothold. Private First Class Daniel. Russo presses himself deeper into the trench as dirt sprays across his helmet. "Bazooka, again!" the lieutenant shouts. The anti-tank team works quickly. One man slides another rocket into the launcher while the gunner steadies the tube on the ridge edge. The half-track closes to within 80 yards. Its gunner standing high behind the shield firing non-stop. The bazooka ignites with a violent backblast. The rocket streaks across the field and strikes the vehicle just below the machine gun mount. The explosion lifts the front wheels clear off the ground. Flames burst through the engine compartment as the half-track skids, sideways and crashes into a ditch beside the road. Smoke billows upward in thick black clouds. The paratroopers erupt in brief cheers, but the celebration dies quickly, because the infantry behind the destroyed vehicles keep advancing. German soldiers spread across the farmland in long skirmish lines, rifles and submachine guns flashing as they move through hedgerows and irrigation ditches. Mortar rounds begin falling along the dike again, sending geysers of dirt into the air. Russo reloads his Garand with shaking hands. The Americans are still badly outnumbered, and many of the units that cross the river are scattered, mixed together, officers trying to assemble. some kind of defensive line before the Germans push them back into the water. "Form up on the road," a captain shouts further down the ridge. Paratroopers begin moving along the dike, leaving the shoreline behind and pushing toward the narrow farm road that leads into Nijmegen. Their objective is clear now. The bridges, two massive spans crossing the Waal River, the highway bridge and the railway bridge beside it. If German forces retain control of those bridges, Operation Market Garden collapses. Everything depends on capturing them before they can be destroyed. Russo runs beside a group of soldiers moving off the dike into open farmland. The ground is uneven and soaked from recent rain, boots slipping as they advance between hedgerows. Gunfire cracks from every direction. German infantry appear suddenly from behind a farmhouse ahead, firing MP-40 submachine guns toward the advancing Americans. The paratroopers drop to the ground instantly. "Flank them!" someone yells. Two squads peel off to the right, crawling along a drainage ditch while another group lays down covering fire. Russo fires carefully through the hedges, the recoil of his rifle steady and familiar now despite the chaos around him. A grenade explodes near the farmhouse door. Seconds later, the American flanking squad storms the building. Short bursts of gunfire echo from inside. Then silence. The unit pushes forward again. Every step toward Nijmegen becomes another small battle. German resistance stiffens with every field they cross. Machine guns open from barns, church towers, even roadside ditches where infantry squads have dug quick defensive positions. Mortars begin falling more accurately now. The Germans are ranging their fire. Russo dives behind a stone wall as a shell explodes nearby, the blast wave punching the air from his lungs. He coughs violently, ears ringing, vision blurred by smoke and dust. When the haze clears, the lieutenant is shouting again. "Keep moving! Armor is coming from the south." That changes everything. Across the river, British armored units of the Guards, Armored Division, are racing north toward the Nijmegen Bridge. If they reach the southern end while the Americans attack from the north, the German defense will collapse. But timing is critical. If the Germans destroy the bridge before that link-up happens, the entire offensive stalls. Russo and the others push through another hedgerow. And then they finally see it, rising above the rooftops of Nijmegen like a steel giant. The Waal River Highway Bridge. Its massive arches stretch across the skyline, towering above the city streets. Smoke drifts around its far end where German vehicles move frantically across the span, defending it, preparing it, perhaps wiring it for demolition. The paratroopers stop briefly behind a row of shattered houses at the edge of the city. Officers gather quickly. Maps unfold. Orders are whispered. The final assault will begin here. Street fighting, urban combat, house to house. And every German soldier in Nijmegen knows exactly what the Americans are trying to do. Russo wipes mud from his face and checks the ammunition remaining in his bandolier. Not much, but enough, because there is no turning back now. Behind them lies the river they crossed under fire. Ahead lies the bridge that could end the battle. And somewhere inside the city, German engineers may already be preparing the explosives that will destroy it. If the Americans do not reach the bridge in time, the entire sacrifice on the Waal River will have been for nothing. And the next minutes will decide everything. September 20th, 1944, 16:02 hours. Northern District, Nijmegen, the Netherlands. The first shots inside the city echo like thunder between brick walls. Paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne surge past the last hedgerow and into the narrow streets of Nijmegen. Boots pound against cobblestones still wet from the afternoon rain. Broken windows glitter across the pavement like scattered ice. Private First Class Daniel Russo runs beside a shattered storefront, breathing hard, rifle clutched tight against his chest. The city smells of smoke, brick dust, and burning gasoline. Ahead, the tall steel arch of the Waal Bridge dominates the skyline. It is closer now, still too far. "Move, move!" a lieutenant shouts. The paratroopers spread across the street in small fire teams, rifles scanning every doorway and alley. German defenders know exactly what is coming. Somewhere in the maze of buildings around the bridge, soldiers from several Wehrmacht units are preparing to stop them. The first ambush comes quickly, a burst of MP-40. Fire erupts from a second-floor window, overlooking the street. Bullets rip into the pavement, sending shards of stone flying. "Sniper!" someone yells. Russo dives behind a delivery truck riddled with bullet holes. Another paratrooper fires 3 rapid shots toward the window. The rifle cracks echo sharply between the buildings. The machine gun stops, but no one waits to confirm the kill. They move again. Every corner becomes a potential death trap. German soldiers fire from rooftops, attic windows. and barricades built from overturned carts and furniture dragged into the street. The defenders are determined. Some wear the gray uniforms of the regular army. Others belong to SS units rushed into Nijmegen only hours earlier. A German machine gun suddenly opens fire from the entrance of a narrow alley. The weapon is mounted low behind sandbags. The stream of bullets forces the Americans flat against the pavement. Russo feels fragments of brick rain across his helmet as rounds smash into the wall above him. The lieutenant signals 2 soldiers forward. Grenades. The men crawl along the sidewalk until they reach the mouth of the alley. One pulls the pin and tosses the grenade over the sandbags. The explosion is deafening in the confined space. Dust and smoke billow outward. Seconds later, the paratroopers charge the position. A short, brutal burst of gunfire. Then silence. The advance continues. But the closer they get to the bridge, the heavier the resistance becomes. German forces know the bridge must not fall intact. Every street approaching it becomes a defensive line. Mortar rounds begin falling again, landing among rooftops and sending tiles cascading into the streets below. Civilians hide in basements while the battle rages. Above them, Russo sprints across an intersection, just as a machine gun opens fire from the far side. A paratrooper beside him drops instantly. The man does not move again. Russo does not stop. No one stops. They reach another building and smash through the door, boots thundering up the staircase. At the top floor, a German soldier tries to bring his rifle to bear. Too late. 3 American rifles fire at once. The soldier collapses across the window frame. Russo pushes past him and looks out. The bridge is now only a few hundred meters away. German vehicles are racing across it. Trucks and half-tracks moving frantically between the northern and southern banks of the river, defending it, preparing for something, maybe demolition. Down on the street, American officers gather quickly around a map spread across the hood of a wrecked car. Orders pass through the platoons. 2 companies will push straight toward the northern ramp of the highway bridge. Another group will secure nearby buildings to prevent German snipers from firing down on the assault force. Russo reloads his rifle again. He is down to his last clips of ammunition, but the objective is now within reach. The paratroopers move out, street by street, house by house. German resistance grows desperate. As the Americans approach the final intersection leading directly to the bridge approach, a heavy machine gun opens fire from behind a barricade made of tram rails and sandbags. The weapon sweeps the street. No one can cross. For several seconds, the entire advance stalls. Then a sergeant points toward a narrow side street. Through there! A small squad rushes down the alley, moving fast along the back walls of the buildings. They emerge behind the barricade seconds later. 2 grenades fly through the air. The explosions tear the German position apart. The path to the bridge is suddenly open. Paratroopers surge forward again. And as Russo rounds the final corner, the full scale of the objective appears before him. The enormous steel ramp of the Waal Bridge rising above the city. German soldiers scrambling across its roadway. And at the far end, something even more terrifying. Engineers, working around stacks of explosives attached to the bridge structure. The charges are already in place. If they detonate them now, everything ends. September 20th, 1944, 16:21 hours. Northern approach to the Waal Bridge, Nijmegen. The wind off the river carries the smell of wet steel and explosives. Private First Class Daniel. Russo crouches behind the concrete barrier at the base of the bridge ramp, breathing hard. Sweat stings his eyes despite the cool Dutch air. Ahead, the massive span stretches across the wall like a steel highway into chaos. German soldiers are everywhere. Trucks grind across the bridge deck. Infantry scramble between sandbag emplacements. Machine guns are positioned at the railings, their barrels already searching the streets below. And scattered along the steel supports beneath the roadway are the unmistakable shapes of demolition charges, explosives, enough to tear the bridge apart. Captain Robert Moore lowers his binoculars slowly. "Damn it," he mutters. The charges are already wired. German engineers move quickly along the structure, checking cables that run toward a detonator position near the far end of the bridge. If those charges are triggered, the entire span will collapse into the Waal River. Operation Market Garden will lose its most critical crossing point. Moore turns to his platoon leaders. "We take it now. No artillery preparation. No tanks. Just paratroopers." Russo checks his ammunition again. 2 clips left. Beside him, Sergeant Gallagher wipes dirt from his Thompson submachine gun and grins with tired eyes. "Well, boys," he says quietly, "looks like we're storming a bridge." A whistle blows, and the paratroopers move. They burst from cover and sprint toward the ramp. The German machine guns react instantly. The first burst of MG-42 fire tears across the roadway like a ripping sheet of metal. Bullets slam into the concrete around the advancing Americans. One paratrooper drops before reaching the ramp. Another stumbles but keeps running. Russo charges forward with the others, boots hammering against the asphalt as the roar of gunfire fills the air. The bridge becomes a tunnel of sound. Machine guns hammer. Rifles crack. Mortar rounds whistle overhead. Somewhere behind them, American artillery finally begins firing. Shells screaming over the city toward German positions beyond the river. But on the bridge itself, it is man against man. The first squad reaches the sandbag position at the base of the ramp. Grenades fly. 2 explosions erupt among the German gunners. The machine gun falls silent. "Go, go!" Gallagher shouts. They surge upward onto the bridge deck. From this height, the river spreads wide and gray beneath them, churning slowly in the evening light. But there is no time to look. German defenders are retreating up the roadway, firing as they fall back. Russo drops behind a steel girder and fires 3 quick shots. A German soldier collapses near a parked truck. Another American squad pushes toward the left side of the bridge where demolition cables run along the railings. Lieutenant Harris spots them first. "Cut those wires!" 2 paratroopers sprint toward the cables, rifles slung as they pull out wire cutters. German rifle fire snaps around them. One man dives behind the railing. The other reaches the first cable. Snip. The heavy wire falls loose against the steel frame. But there are dozens more. Meanwhile, farther up the bridge, German engineers race toward a small control position where the main detonator box sits protected behind sandbags. If they reach it first, the charges can still be fired manually. Captain Moore sees the danger immediately. "Stop them!" A squad breaks into a full sprint across the open roadway. Bullets chase them. One man spins and falls. The rest keep running. Russo moves with the second wave, advancing from girder to girder as the firefight spreads across the bridge. Smoke drifts through the steel lattice overhead. The air vibrates with gunfire. Near the center span, Sergeant Gallagher slides beside. Russo and fires a burst from his Thompson toward a cluster of German troops retreating toward the detonator position. 2 soldiers fall, but the engineers keep moving. They are almost there. At the cable line, the paratroopers continue cutting wires as fast as they can. Each cut removes another connection to the explosives placed along the bridge supports. But no one knows how many circuits remain active. One missed wire could still destroy everything. Suddenly, a German machine gun opens fire from behind a truck halfway across the span. The weapon pins down the Americans advancing toward the detonator. Gallagher swears and reloads. "We're stuck!" Russo glances toward the river, then toward the truck. An idea flashes through his mind. He crawls along the outside edge of the bridge railing, gripping the steel with gloved hands as bullets strike sparks above him. The river churns 40 meters below. One slip and he is gone. Slowly, painfully, he moves forward until he is directly beside the truck. The machine gun continues firing at the American squad ahead. Russo pulls a grenade from his belt, counts 2 seconds. Then he lobs it upward through the open side of the vehicle. The explosion blasts through the truck bed in a roar of flame and metal. The machine gun falls silent. "Move!" someone shouts. The squad charges again, across the bridge, toward the detonator. But just as the Americans close the final distance, one of the German engineers reaches the control box and throws open the lid. Inside, wires lead to a single ignition handle. The engineer grips it tightly and begins to pull. September 20th, 1944, 16:33 hours. Centerspan, Waal River, Nijmegen. The German engineer pulls the detonator handle halfway. For a single terrifying second, everything seems to freeze. Private Daniel Russo sees the movement from 20 meters away. The metal lever rising, the wires tightening, the bridge about to vanish. "Stop him!" Someone screams. Sergeant Gallagher fires first. His Thompson rattles violently in his hands, 45 caliber rounds, tearing across the sandbags around the detonator position. The German engineer flinches, but he does not let go. Behind him, another German soldier raises his rifle and fires toward the charging paratroopers. Bullets snap past Russo's helmet. The American squad dives behind the nearest truck as splinters of metal explode around them. Gallagher slams another magazine into his Thompson and leans around the tire. "Keep moving," he shouts. Across the bridge deck, the firefight erupts into chaos. Machine guns hammer from both directions. German infantry retreat toward the far bank while firing desperately over their shoulders. Some are engineers, Some are rearguard troops, but every one of them understands the same thing. If the Americans take the bridge intact, the road to Arnhem opens, and the entire German defense line north of the Waal begins to collapse. The engineer pulls harder on the detonator lever. Russo sees the motion again. Too slow, too far away. He cannot reach him in time. Then Lieutenant Harris stands up from behind the truck, completely exposed. "Harris, get down!" Gallagher shouts. But Harris ignores him. He raises his M1 Garand, steadies the barrel against the truck hood, and takes aim across the bridge. The distance is nearly 40 meters. Smoke drifts across the roadway. Bullets crack overhead. The engineer's hand tightens around the detonator. Harris exhales and fires. The rifle cracks sharply above the roar of battle. The German engineer jerks backward. The detonator handle slips from his grip. He collapses beside the control box, motionless. For half a second, nobody moves. Then the American squad explodes forward. Russo runs harder than he has ever run in his life. He vaults over the sandbags and slams into the detonator station just as another German soldier reaches for the ignition box. Gallagher fires 2 quick shots. The soldier falls backward onto the bridge deck. Russo grabs the handle of the detonator. His heart pounds violently in his chest. He stares at the wires running from the control box. There are dozens of them, each one leading to explosives hidden along the bridge supports. If even one circuit is still connected, the entire structure could still detonate. "Cut them!" Harris shouts. 2 paratroopers drop beside the box with wire cutters. They begin snipping frantically. Thick cables fall loose one after another. Metal clinks against the roadway. Russo keeps one hand on the detonator lever, holding it steady while the wires are cut. Another American squad spreads along the bridge railing, searching for additional demolition, lines that might still be connected to secondary charges. German resistance begins to collapse. Some defenders surrender. Others flee toward the far bank. But a few continue firing desperately from behind vehicles and barricades. A burst of machine gun fire slams into the sandbags beside Russo. He ducks instinctively. Gallagher leans over the barricade and fires a long burst from his Thompson. The gunner disappears behind the truck. "Last wire!" one of the paratroopers shouts. The cutter snaps shut. The cable falls free. For a moment, nobody speaks. Russo looks at the tangle of severed wires lying across the bridge deck. Then he slowly releases the detonator handle. Nothing happens. The bridge remains standing. The realization spreads through the American soldiers like electricity. They did it, against machine guns, against explosives, against impossible odds. They stopped the demolition. A roar of exhausted cheers echoes across the steel span. But the battle is not finished yet, because while the paratroopers fought across the bridge, something even more important has been happening behind them, across the river. On the southern bank, engines are beginning to roar. Captain Moore climbs onto the sandbags and looks south through his binoculars. What he sees makes him smile for the first time that day. Columns of armored vehicles are rolling toward the bridge entrance. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, supply trucks, the lead elements of the British XXX Corps. The bridge is open, and the road to Arnhem is finally within reach. But as the first tanks begin crossing the steel, span behind the exhausted paratroopers, a distant rumble rolls across the horizon. Artillery, German artillery. Because farther north, beyond the city, the real battle for Arnhem is still raging. And the soldiers, defending that distant bridge, are about to learn something devastating. Relief is still not coming fast enough. September 20th, 1944, 1712 hours. Waal River, Nijmegen. The first Sherman tank rumbles onto the steel span. Its tracks grind loudly against the bridge decking, the heavy machine vibrating as it moves forward behind the exhausted paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division. Private Daniel Russo stands beside the severed detonator wires, watching the massive vehicle roll past him. The tank commander leans halfway out of the turret hatch, goggles smeared with dust and sweat. He raises a gloved hand. "Hell of a job, Airborne!" Russo manages a tired nod. Around him, American paratroopers sit or lean against the railing, breathing hard after the brutal fight across the bridge. Some reload magazines. Others simply stare down at the river below. The Waal flows quietly now. Hours earlier, it had been a killing ground. Canvas boats drifting through gunfire, men disappearing into dark water, smoke and bullets tearing across the surface. Now the river reflects the orange glow of the late afternoon sun. The crossing is over, but the cost is impossible to ignore. Stretchers lie along the bridge edge. Medics move carefully between the wounded. checking bandages, giving morphine injections, whispering reassurance. Several empty helmets sit beside the railing. No one touches them. Captain Moore watches the armored column continue rolling across the bridge. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, supply trucks packed with ammunition and infantry. The long-awaited advance of the British XXX Corps is finally moving forward. Operation Market Garden had depended on speed. Airborne troops seizing bridges, ground forces racing north to relieve them. Everything planned down to the hour. But war does not move according to schedules. The Nijmegen crossing alone has taken nearly an entire day, and far to the north, another group of paratroopers is still waiting. The men of the British 1st Airborne Division, trapped at Arnhem. Moore lowers his binoculars slowly. He knows the reports. Radio messages arriving all afternoon. German resistance stronger than expected. Panzer units appearing where Allied planners believed none existed. At Arnhem Bridge, British paratroopers have been fighting for nearly 3 days, outnumbered, low on ammunition. Cut off from relief, the road north from Nijmegen is now open. But the distance still matters. Nearly 15 kilometers. Through enemy territory, through narrow roads vulnerable to ambush and artillery. Every hour lost today has cost the British defenders dearly. Behind Moore, the paratroopers begin helping guide the armored vehicles across the bridge. "Keep moving! No stops on the span!" a lieutenant shouts. The tanks obey, engines roaring as they accelerate across the steel structure. The entire bridge vibrates beneath their weight. Private Russo walks slowly toward the railing. He looks north, beyond the city, beyond the horizon. Somewhere up there, other airborne soldiers are still fighting, still holding the final bridge of Operation Market Garden, and they are running out of time. Night begins creeping across the Dutch countryside. German artillery suddenly booms from the distance. Shells explode several hundred meters north of the bridge, sending fountains of dirt into the air. The advancing column slows briefly, then continues moving. The bridge must remain open. It is the only road forward, the only chance to reach Arnhem. As darkness spreads, headlights begin appearing along the highway. An endless convoy pushing north, but the battlefield ahead is far from empty. German reinforcements are already moving to block the road. Panzergrenadiers, anti-tank guns, armored vehicles rushing toward the sound of battle. They understand the same thing the Allies do. If the road closes again tonight, the men at Arnhem will be finished. Hours pass. More tanks cross the bridge. More infantry march north. The road fills with the sounds of engines, shouted commands, and distant explosions. But Arnhem remains out of reach. By the time the leading British armor finally reaches the outskirts of the city the following day, the situation has already changed. The British paratroopers who held Arnhem Bridge for so long are gone. Some killed, many captured, a few scattered survivors escaping across the Rhine under cover of darkness. The bridge still stands, but the operation has failed. Back in Nijmegen, the Waal Bridge remains firmly in Allied hands. Traffic continues moving across it day and night. Tanks, ambulances, supply trucks. The crossing that once seemed impossible has become routine. Yet the men who survived that river assault will never forget the moment they pushed those fragile canvas boats into the water. They knew the machine guns were waiting. They knew the river was wide. They knew many of them would never reach the opposite bank. And still they crossed, paddling through gunfire, fighting through the streets, charging across the bridge to stop the explosives before the entire structure disappeared into the Waal. It was one of the most daring river assaults of the Second World War, a mission that looked like suicide, but succeeded, even though the larger battle for Arnhem slipped beyond their reach. Tonight, the Waal flows quietly beneath the bridge once again, but if you stand on that steel span long enough, you can almost hear the echoes. Canvas boats scraping against the shore, machine guns hammering across open water, and the voices of paratroopers shouting as they raced across the Devil's Bridge to save it.